things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever home. Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Don't you wish that your weekend was longer than just 2 days? Well, if so, then you're in luck, because here on Ripon Common Sense Radio, our weekend begins on Wednesday. Yes, you heard that right. Our weekend kicks off every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with Dark Wolf's Den, starring yours truly, Jerry the Dark Wolf. But that's where the fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back every Thursday through Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show, starring AJ the Ripon Rabbit. He dives into the archives of vocal legend Art Bell and brings those stories up to date. So make sure that you spend your extended weekends with the Animals of Radio, Jerry the Dark Wolf and AJ the Ripon Rabbit, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, every Wednesday through Sunday, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference. And you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Hello. Introducing
Lasers.
Hello.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight is July 29th, 2020, and this is a specially big episode. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are going to talk about giants. That's right, the big old boys of old, the men of renown. You know, Genesis 6, I believe it was. But there are many mentions of giants in ancient lore, like Gilgamesh in the Sumerian tales was a king, and he's accepted as a real person, and he was considered to be a giant, something like 8 or 9 foot tall.
The Sumerian civilization, which was said to have begun in approximately 6000 BC, tells of a race of giants which ruled over the Sumerians, and there are many depictions of them.
And we, of course, call these the Anunnaki.
Sumerian records speak of a giant king by the name of Gilgamesh, who ruled for 126 years. He is generally seen by scholars as an actual historical figure, since inscriptions have been found which confirm the existence of other figures associated with him.
And for those that are 30 or 40 years old, they may remember the wrestler, the Andre the Giant. Turns out he was from France, and that'll be important later, but that was a great big man. He stood 7 foot 4 inches tall. He was truly a giant compared to most people. Another famous historical account, or set of historical accounts, is within the Bible. Of course, Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4 read, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which are of old, men of renown, as I opened the show with earlier. And it clearly says there were giants in the earth in those days. And this is the King James Version. For those who are wondering, it is not a newer translation. It truly says there were giants in the earth in those days. Now, a lot of people reference that this could be the Nephilim, or the fallen angels, and it very well could be. And you remember that it said in the end times, it will be as it was in the days of Noah, and this was in the time of Noah. There's also mention in Numbers 13, which I don't have in front of me, but it also mentions the giants, and I believe the Nephilim. I may be mistaken on that particular verse. But that's just one example in the Bible. There's also the popular story, as we all know, of David and Goliath.
David was the youngest of 8 brothers. His job was being a shepherd, which meant he spent all day in a field watching sheep eat and roll around the grass. Meanwhile, some of his brothers were off with the Israeli army preparing for war against the Philistines. The Philistines were one of the toughest armies the people of Israel had to fight. So one day, David was taking food to his brothers because his dad asked him to. But when he got there, his brothers accused him of coming so he could watch the fight instead of the sheep. Since David knew in his heart he was just obeying his dad, he didn't mind being misunderstood. Anyway, while David was there, he saw a huge Philistine man, more than 9 feet tall, step onto the field between the two armies. He was wearing a thick helmet and armor and carrying huge weapons. His name was Goliath, and he was definitely used to being the winner.
The reason I chose that soundbite is because it is from a children's explanation of the Bible, and it lists very specifically that Goliath was over 9 foot tall. That is one large man.
The book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, tells us the story of an ancient giant race called the Nephilim. The story of the Nephilim giants is further elaborated in another ancient manuscript, the Book of Enoch. Apparently, the Watchers, who were fallen angels, interbred with the women on earth, and as a result, the Nephilim giants were born. We know that these ancient manuscripts describe the Great Deluge, a massive flood which, according to scientific data, really happened. If the biblical flood was real, could the Nephilim giants also be real?
Not only could, but can the Nephilim giants be real? I mean, really, could they have survived the flood? A lot of people think that the fallen angels, of course, the Nephilim, still exist to this day. And as I stated earlier, giant evidence has been found all around the world, including yet another place that was also mentioned in the Bible itself.
Another discovery made in 1890 in Egypt resulted in a sarcophagus being unearthed that contained 2 giant skeletons, one of a 3-meter tall man and the other of a 2-meter tall woman. That would mean that the woman was 6.5 feet tall while the man was almost 10. Since large skeletons are often found close to each other or buried together, some theorists believe that if giants did exist, they lived in groups, just like humans.
And we know in Egypt we see a lot of paintings and drawings that seem to show giant humans opposed to other humans. And of course archaeologists always say that these are just, kings, and it shows a higher position. That's why they're drawn bigger. But what if that's not the case? What if they were really directly depicting giants opposed to the regular people? Maybe they were trying to literally tell us that these giants were actually around.
In ancient Egypt, there are hundreds of depictions of giants, and the Egyptian records describe the old pharaoh dynasties to be a race of tall giants, and hundreds of giant sarcophaguses were also found. But the mummies there had been long looted. This unusual story, with a headline, Prehistoric Egyptian Giants, was reported in multiple newspapers and reads, in 1881, when Professor Timmerman was engaged in exploring the ruins of an ancient temple of Isis on the banks of the Nile, 16 miles below Najar Jafard, he opened a row of tombs in which some prehistoric race of giants had been buried. The smallest skeleton out of some 60-odd, which were examined during the time Timmerman was excavating at Najar Jafard, measured 7 feet and 8 inches in length, and the largest 11 feet 1 inch. Memorial tablets were discovered in great numbers, but there was no record that even hinted that they were in the memory of men of extraordinary size. It is believed that the tombs date back to the year 1043 BC.
And, it would be a lot easier to explain 10 to 15, 20-ton stones being moved into place in the pyramids if it was being done by giants.
According to the German newspaper Bild, an entrepreneur named Gregor Spory took a number of photos of a mummified giant finger in 1988. The owner of the finger was a retired grave robber who found the finger in an undisclosed tomb. The finger is nearly 14 inches long, and if it is genuine, it belonged to someone estimated to have been between 15 and 16 feet tall. The owner of the finger had a certificate to say that the finger was authentic, together with an X-ray image. Later, when Spory returned to Egypt to purchase the finger, the owner had disappeared, leaving us only with the photographs of this discovery.
This is an absolutely incredible find, albeit that all we do have left is photos. Of course, if that isn't the story of when it comes to giants and different evidences that it all disappears, but we'll get into that later. But anyway, if it isn't interesting, though, it had a certificate of authentication with it, as well as the x-rays showing that it was a legit artifact. And once again, all around the world, these discoveries have been made.
For hundreds of years, there have been various written reports of people unearthing giant human skeletons. The giant of Castelnau is only one of the most famous examples. In 1890, anthropologist Georges Vacher de Lepage discovered 3 bone fragments, a humerus, tibia, and femoral midshaft, in a Bronze Age cemetery in France.
And you remember earlier we mentioned that Andre the Giant was from France. Maybe this was one of his ancestors that they found.
Dating back to the Neolithic, these skeletal remains are estimated to have belonged to one of the largest human-like creatures on Earth. While the skeletal remains do seem entirely similar to a regular human skeleton, they're estimated to have belonged to someone 11 foot 6 inches or 3.5 meters tall. Even modern-day humans wouldn't be able to reach such insane heights.
Now, I once used to work with a guy at Train Air Conditioner Factory who stood 7 foot tall, flat foot. But 11 foot tall, I know that man was tall, but 11 foot tall, there's no way I could even imagine somebody that big.
Even when entire skeletons and complete bone fragments are hard to come by, strangely proportioned intact skulls have been found in burial sites and ruins, offering hints at the gigantic bodies they once belonged to. In 1913, giant skulls were found in the Ozark Cave in Arkansas. The cave had long been flooded by the time researchers made their discovery. With the help of a professional scuba diver, exploring the cave resulted in some interesting finds. Buried in the ash floor of a shelter surrounded by a 70-foot tall stone wall, researchers uncovered a small cache of gigantic skulls and a few other skeletal pieces to go with them. But what was so strange was the remarkable size of the skulls. The researchers estimated that the largest of these skulls must have belonged to someone almost 10 feet tall. The isolated location, tall stone walls, and gigantic skulls suggest that the cave may have been home to a society of giants.
American lore, as some people know, I'm sure, is full, and I mean absolutely packed full of giants. For instance, we have the giant mounds that stretch across the Ohio River Valley. And let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff that has been found in those things.
In 1848, President Abraham Lincoln visited the Niagara Falls, and he was so impressed by the beauty of this natural wonder that he wrote down some notes, including the following. When Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his Maker, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now.
You know, it's funny, in today's world, to even speak of giants is, craziness, conspiracy theory, and woo-woo, right? However, you have things like President Abraham Lincoln being quoted speaking of giants as a very real thing.
During the 19th century, there were many accounts of unnaturally large skeletal remains discovered in the ancient burial mounds scattered across North America. Today, not a single news media has ever mentioned a thing about ancient giants or past discoveries. If a giant skeleton is discovered somewhere, it would most certainly be classified and hidden from the public. It wasn't like that in the 19th and early 20th century, though. Almost every year, there were at least a few newspaper headlines stating the discovery of ancient giant skeletons. It seemed to be quite normal to find bones of giants in America when the first settlers dug ancient mounds to prepare for roads, farms, and buildings.
Not only was it not a woo-woo or taboo topic, it was actually something that was more than normal to the people of that time. However, today we're told that that's nothing but rubbish and, lies and all this. And woo-woo, and maybe, possibly a case here or there of gigantism, was that we're going to find this is more than just a case or two of mutated gigantism in humans.
The New York Times, in particular, wrote many newspaper articles about the discoveries of giants. Let's read through some of them, starting with this one titled, "The Bones of a Giant Found," which was published on May 25, 1882, and reads, "A skull of heroic size and singular formation has been discovered among the relics of the mound builders in the Red River Valley. The mound was 60 feet in diameter and 12 feet high. Near the center were found the bones of about a dozen men and women, mixed with the bones of various animals. The skull in question was the only perfect one, and near it were found some abnormally large body bones. The man who bore it was evidently a giant. A thorough investigation of the mound and its contents will be made by the Historical Society."
You guys know how I love to bring you obscure case files, and this episode, of course, is no different. And I love this episode a lot because I've actually been able to run across a large batch of obscure case files about giants and giant bones that just don't get talked about. Like, for instance, in his book, The Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee, author John Haywood describes, quote, "very large," end quote, bones in stone graves found in Williamson County, Tennessee in 1821. In White County, Tennessee, an ancient fortification contained skeletons of gigantic stature, averaging at least 7 feet in length.
Another newspaper from May 5, 1885 reads this: "Last week, a small mound near Homer was opened by some schoolboys who found a skeleton. Today, a further search was made, and several feet below the surface of the earth in a large vault with a stone floor and bark covering were found 4 huge skeletons, 3 being each over 7 feet in length, and the other 8.
One account I dug up is a large mound near Gasterville, Pennsylvania, contained a vault in which was found a skeleton measuring 7 feet 2 inches. Inscriptions were carved on the vault. This is from the American Antiquarian Magazine, Volume 7 from 1885.
This article from the San Antonio Express is telling about a giant skull that is twice the size of a normal human, and there is also a picture. The article reads, "Beach giant skull unearthed by WPA workers near Victoria, believed to be largest ever found in the world. Normal head also found." That Texas had a giant in the beach in the long ago appears probable from the large skull recently unearthed on a mound in Victoria County, believed to be the largest human skull ever found in the United States and probably in the world. Twice the size of the skull of a normal man, the fragments were dug up by W. Duffin, an archaeologist who is excavating the mound in Victoria County under a WPA project sponsored by the University of Texas. In the same mound and at the same level, a normal-sized skull was found. The pieces taken from the mound were reconstructed in the WPA laboratory under the supervision of physical anthropologists. A study is being made to determine whether the huge skull was that of a man belonging to a tribe of extraordinary large men, or whether the skull was that of an abnormal member of a tribe, a case of gigantism. Several large human bones have been unearthed at this site.
And of course, as everyone knows, Ripon Common Sense Radio is out of Ripon, Wisconsin. And we've got quite a few finds, actually, of giant bones in Wisconsin.
Another article from the New York Times, written in 1897, reads, "One of the 3 recently discovered mounds in this town has been opened. In it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet high and 30 feet long, and varies from 6 to 8 feet in width. The 2 mounds of lesser size will be excavated soon."
Remember, this is a newspaper report from the time. This is not just off some website or whatever the case may be. These are legit newspaper reports that were in the newspaper at the time.
Phillips excavation. A news article from 1912 details the excavation of a burial mound completed by the Phillips brothers at Lake Declan in Wisconsin. According to the New York Times, on May 4th, 18 giant skeletons that were carefully buried in charcoal and baked clay were uncovered from a presumed burial mound. The bones were said to be monkey-like in many ways, such as straight sloping eye sockets and a nasal placement higher than that of a human, but were obviously human bones. Many other alleged giant bones have been found in Wisconsin, with the New York Times also reporting skeletons found by a Smithsonian researcher in 1881 and one 9-foot skeleton found in Maple Creek years later in 1897. Certainly, such repeated results are at least some cause for interest and concern.
Which, of course, only adds to the amazement of such a wonderful state as Wisconsin, but across the entire West, the wild, wild West, if you will, there has been a lot of strange evidences found.
This article from the St. Paul Globe, written in 1904, states, "Bones of a human skeleton 11 feet high are dug up in Nevada. Workmen engaged in digging gravel here today uncovered at a depth of about 12 feet a lot of bones, part of the skeleton of a gigantic human being. Dr. Samuels examined them and pronounced them to be the bones of a man who must have been nearly 11 feet in height."
11 foot tall is one big old boy, I tell you what. I tell you what, doing this episode, I gotta, thinking of somebody 11, 10, 12 foot tall, that's just scary. The more I think about it, the more concerned and disturbed I get. That's one big person. So with all this evidence being dug up around the West, it makes you wonder, before Europeans came over, did the Native Americans speak of giants? Did they have any lore about giants roaming the lands before the Europeans came, while it was just them in North America?
Every Native American tribe tells of the times when giants used to rule North America, and there were brutal wars between the giants and the Native Americans. The tribes had to unite together against a group of red-haired cannibalistic giants and fought them to extinction.
Which brings us into our last story before the break, and that is the story of Lovelock Cave, which is a very, very famous story out of Nevada and ties right back in with the giants of Native American lore.
In 1911, 2 Nevada miners named David Hart and James Pugh took interest in the large deposits of bat feces, also known as guano, which they planned to sell for use in making gunpowder. During their digging, the 2 men uncovered some incredible archaeological finds and called upon Alfred Kroeber, the founder of the anthropology department at the University of California. Several normal-sized mummies were uncovered, as well as a few who were amazingly over 8 to 10 feet tall. Some sandals were also found that measured in at around 38 centimeters long, along with many giant-sized handprints embedded into the cave walls.
I find this case very intriguing because, number one, you've got the mix of the giant bones as well as the bones of regular size. Then you've got the handprints also to match of small as well as the giant handprints. Now, how the smaller handprints got into the cave is an interesting thought, but the giant handprints, as we know, would not be as hard for, a giant to smack the wall and it leave a handprint behind. But how does this tie back with the Native American lore we were just speaking of?
Interestingly, the local Paiute Native American tribe spoke in lore of red-haired, white-skinned giants called Site-Cha, living in the Lovelock cave system, where the mummies were discovered.
And like before mentioned, that's just one of many Native American legends, because they all had legends about the giants. But as you guys hear, it is time for us to go ahead and take a network break, so you guys sit tight and we'll be right back right after these messages with a gargantuan amount of information, just like the first half. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Dark Wolf's Den Show right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. Don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the city? Nope. Interview with a vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect. Unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the hey? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember before in the car, my mind was in total disarray. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say we misremembered and call us back. Crazy, did you smoke a doob? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that, on with this Mandela Effect flow. Mandela Effect in the house. What in the world happened to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, yay! American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela Effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science fiction, but you gotta think outside the box and have no restrictions. Alternate realities and parallel dimensions. Okay, I get some of your apprehensions. Could this all be a spiritual evolution? Cause the human race has grown tired of this toxic pollution. Mandela Effect in the house. No, you're not going crazy. Some people, they just don't understand. the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Olstein. Oh wait, Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the L? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is definitely the Twilight Zone. This is crazy. Anyhow.
Are you a YouTube creator that's tired of fighting over copyright issues for using the wrong music in your videos? Or perhaps a songwriter looking for something new? I know when I started Dark Wolf's Den, I needed some original music, and for me, the answer was a no-brainer. I immediately called Tom Bayless of Red Shed Studios. Tom has been in the music industry for over 20 years and has a true passion for the art. So if you need a custom soundtrack for your next project, make sure you contact Tom Bayless at Red Shed Studios at 920-344-7634. That's 920-344-7634. Red Shed Studios.
Hi everyone, it's AJ. Are you enjoying tonight's Dark Wolf's Den as he howls at giants? If you've enjoyed the program so far, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell with notifications. As Jerry is here every Wednesday night starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, he kicks the weekend off right. Speaking of which, here's a look at our schedule. Thursday, July 30th, tomorrow night, I'll return with Pharaoh's Curse. We dive down the rabbit hole into the Tut Curse. Is it evil spirits or just coincidental bad luck? Tune in tomorrow night, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and find out. Then Friday, July 31st, you'll want to join us for Deep Fakes. In an age of fake news and media, what is a deep fake and what isn't? We're going to dive through that rabbit hole together, but more important, we're going to look at ways to spot these deep fakes before they fool us. Then Saturday, August 1st, 2020, co-host Moneybags73 will be here. Our look at the Mandela Monthly for August. That's Saturday, August 1st, 2020. We're going to look at Mandela Effect historical events. I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm going to be prepared to have my mind blown. Then we'll end out the weekend together Sunday, August 2nd, for our monthly installment of the Fantastic Fun Show. If you have no idea, this is an interactive game night where we play an interactive game once a month, and currently JoJo's is seated on the throne as the Fantastic Fun King Queen. Now, will she stay seated, or perhaps will somebody knock her off the throne, take the crown, and claim the Fun King or Queen victory? It's a lot of fun family game night happening this Sunday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the RiponRabbitHole.com. If you haven't done so, hop on over to RiponRabbitHole.com and jump on our mail list. We'll send you out our weekend schedule direct to your inbox every Wednesday morning. You'll get an outlook direct to your inbox of exactly the topics we're going to cover for that weekend. And as you know, the weekends around here start on Wednesdays and flow on through the rabbit hole to Sundays. So it's great having these weekends and spending time with you. We're going to return back to tonight's episode of Giants with Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den Show right here on the Ripon Common Sense Radio Network.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
Yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. and this is the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Welcome back, everybody. I appreciate you sticking with us, whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat. We appreciate you having us right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we've covered a lot of information, dare I say a giant amount of information in the first half, and we are only getting started. There are so many case files with giants. They just can't even begin to describe, but I guess that's exactly what I'm here to do, isn't it? So without further ado, we will continue with the discussion.
Apparently, these discoveries were something completely normal back in the day, and they weren't hidden from the public as they are today. The discoveries of giant skeletons weren't limited just to North America. This article talks of a giant's skeletons found in a cave in Mexico. The article reads, Charles C. Klepp, who has recently returned from Mexico, where he has been in charge of Thomas W. Lawson's mining interest, has called the attention of Professor Agassiz to a remarkable discovery made by him. He found in Mexico a cave containing some 200 skeletons of men, each above 8 feet in height. The cave was evidently the burial place of a race of giants who antedated the Aztecs. Mr. Clapp arranged the bones of one of these skeletons and found the total length to be 8 feet 11 inches.
And I find the fact that they mentioned the Aztecs duly important, because mainly the fact that the Aztecs said that they did not build their pyramids, they found their pyramids. Yes, archaeology says they built them, but the Aztecs themselves said, no, we did not. We just walked up on them and started using them. And now they found giant bones underneath the area where the pyramids also, happen to be in Mexico. And now we've got giant bones in the same area as the pyramids also. It makes you wonder, is this the race that went around the world and put all these pyramids in place? Could these have been even the Atlanteans to some degree? And of course that is highly speculative. But they say history is only written by a handful of people, and one of those people is named Flavius Josephus, and he actually has an account that he talks about where he experienced it with his own eyes, witnessing giants.
Flavius Josephus, a first-century Jewish scholar and historian, wrote this, for which reason they removed their camp to Hebron, and when they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. There were till then left the race of giants, who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men, that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men.
And again, what makes this report so very important is it comes from Josephus Flavius, a well-celebrated and accepted historian that has written most of the history that we celebrate and know today to be real. At least accepted as real. Let me be clear when I say that. There's a lot of unique reports that you just don't hear about, and you used to hear about all the time in the 1800s, 1700s, but now, of course, it's just ridiculed and called ridiculous. However, there were magazines all over the place that were actually publishing different reports of these giants being found, as well as newspapers, as we know. In Minnesota in 1888 were discovered remains of 7 skeletons 7 to 8 feet tall. That's out of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. A mound near Toledo, Ohio, holding 20 skeletons, seated and facing east with jaws and teeth, quote, twice as large as those of present-day people, end quote, and besides each was a large bowl with a, quote, curiously wrought hieroglyphic figures, end quote. That is out of the Chicago Record, October 24th, 1895. There is many accounts across history that have just been buried.
The San Diego giant from 1895, which was an 8-foot 4-inch tall mummified giant. There was even a picture of the giant mummy, which was shown in many newspapers. The mummy was inspected by many scientists, After his inspection, the San Diego giant was purchased by the Smithsonian. 13 years later, in 1908, when the mummy was being exhibited, the Smithsonian ran some tests and suddenly dismissed it as a hoax, saying it was made from gelatin.
And now we're digging into the real depth of this rabbit hole. We know how bad dogmatic science is and how they will go to any length in order to uphold their narrative. And this is one of the worst cases of such a thing. The Smithsonian has become one of the major enemies of archaeology when it comes to ancient archaeology, including things like giants.
The fact that it took that long, and after spending so much money to acquire it, plus the fact that it was carefully inspected by experts 13 years earlier, does suggest there may be more to this story than meets the eye.
Yeah, I love that part too, how it was inspected 13 years earlier and verified as legit. Then all of a sudden they went back and said, oh no, it's gelatin. Because I assure you, if it was gelatin at the time, then what the original was not gelatin. It was disappeared and a gelatin replacement was put there, if anything. And I know that might sound like crazy conspiracy, but that's not actually the first time that something like that has happened with the Smithsonian.
The Smithsonian Institution was reluctant to put these finds on display. The Institute was indifferent to, and sometimes willfully neglectful of, the idea of an ancient race predating the occupation of North America by the first peoples. The idea was contrary to the narrative that the Smithsonian sought to preserve in its own version of history.
And as we know, a lot of history is a very controlled narrative, and the deeper that you look into it, the stranger that it actually becomes. And it's a narrative controlled by places like the Smithsonian Institute and government facilities and, people like that.
They also preferred to promote the manifest destiny of European settlers, to occupy an entire country, displacing its Native Americans. At the same time, the Smithsonian was accepting donations of ancient bones from all over the country.
And of course, at the time, the people thought they were really doing the Smithsonian and doing the country a favor by turning these bones over and turning the evidence over to these authority figures who would actually take care of them and put them in a museum. And, you would expect that you would get some credit off of this, of course, That'd be the general way of thinking. Most people would. So they would want to go ahead and give this to an authoritative figure or museum and, get their credit for it. And down the line, their name would go down in history as finding these giants. However, as we know, that's never the case when dealing with a facility like the Smithsonian.
Examining and documenting these treasures, using their experts in a field known as ethnology.
Using their own experts, of course.
How did so many specimens go missing? They can no longer be found in the Smithsonian collections. The records of analysis are gone, as are the logbooks, in which was recorded the dates when they received the remains of these giants, and the names and addresses of the donors who had shipped the precious cargo cross-country.
I'm not saying that there's a cover-up here, but I am saying if you destroy every bit of evidence that something existed when it was turned over to you in good hopes that it would actually be, researched and looked into by scientists and displayed, and you make it disappear, I'm not saying it's a cover-up. I'm just saying it's a good possibility. It's a cover-up.
A United States Supreme Court ruling in 2014 forced the Smithsonian Institution to release classified papers from the early 1900s, proving it was involved in a major cover-up of evidence, in which hundreds of specimens of giant humans were ordered by high-level administrators to be destroyed.
And why would high-level administrators order something like that to be done? Why would the authority figures order a cover-up of such gigantic or massive proportions? Sorry, I know the puns are bad this episode, but I just can't help myself. But why would they do that? The same reason they've done all the craziness we've heard across all the episodes so far. And that is, of course, the dogmatism that they fight so vehemently to uphold.
To protect the scientific consensus of the age.
And does anyone have any idea what that particular scientific consensus of the age that they were trying to protect was?
Which just happened to favor the shiny new theory of Charles Darwin on human evolution.
And as we know, science fights to uphold any narrative that it has, and it will fight tooth and nail against any and every bit of evidence that it can. Dogmatic science, let me be clear here, real science will accept evidence as such, but dogmatic science, like is practiced by institutes like the Smithsonian, is only a negative thing when it comes to the scientific actual method and learning, instead of holding a narrative and making sure that yours is the only narrative. And we find this a lot in archaeology, sadly. Archaeology is the worst when it comes to dogmatism, and it is something that I rail against. But I cannot finish this episode without including a modern day giant. That's right. If you guys haven't heard, back in 2002 there was a unsubstantiated report, as all the evidence is supposedly classified by the military. And if you guys don't know, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the story of the giant of Kandahar.
In the summer of 2016, a so-called conspiracy started by an Israeli author claimed that in 2002, a monster dubbed the Giant of Kandahar was on the loose in Afghanistan. Several websites claimed that an American Special Forces soldier was attacked by an 1,100-pound, blade-wielding, 12-foot-tall giant from the Old Testament. Eventually, the giant was taken down by the military and whisked away to a secret facility, with the government claiming that he had never existed. It sounds pretty crazy, but a few interviews were done with civilians who claim to have seen the beast. The theory is that it was a Nephilim, which is described in the Bible as the offspring of gods and humans. The official report says that this particular soldier and others were the victims of explosives, but the author and those he interviewed are sticking by their original tall tale.
Okay, think about that excuse for 1 second. They were victims of explosives. That's why they seen giants, because, you know, that's a normal recorded side effect of explosives is seeing giants, right? Right?
This particular account seems far-fetched, but legends of giant Nephilims have been reported in both ancient and modern writings, suggesting that there may have been more truth to these giant hybrids than we think.
And once again, all the details are, of course, classified within the military. If this was an actual operation, we won't know it for another 20 or 30 years, because we know the way our government likes to hide information. But what do you guys think? In all the mythologies all across the world, there are stories of giants. From Japan to Australia to America to Europe to Egypt, all across the world, we hear all these different stories of giants. Could this just be myth, folklore? Could this all be in their heads? Could it be an archetype? Could it be an archetype for power, or a king, or showing that they're ruling over a population? Could that be why a lot of depictions in the ancient times are of a more giant people, like archaeologists say? Or is that a giant load of shenanigans, and were there really giants that have walked the earth? Were they really races of giants that fought the Native Americans? Bones that were buried and dug up by the Smithsonian and made to disappear? There's so many evidences across the years up until modern times of these giants, yet we're told that that is absolute shenanigans, cannot happen. A human cannot grow to that size. The body couldn't support it. The gravity of the earth would not support it. I don't know. I think it is quite possible. If it was proportional, I think it is very possible for a human to stand 10, 12, 15, even 20 feet tall. Now that would be an incredible sight, a 20-foot tall human, but is it impossible? Come on, guys. We live in 2020. Impossible is a word that is getting less and less used nowadays. Unlikely, I wouldn't even say unlikely. I would say it's quite likely and very possible that at one time there were giants that roamed the earth. Even if it's just in the biblical times and the stories of like David and Goliath and the Nephilim of the time, or maybe the fallen angels do exist to this day. Maybe they are giants that are sleeping in some stasis chambers in a cave somewhere in Afghanistan. Or maybe, you never know. Ladies and gentlemen, in the end, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right. That's it for tonight's Dark Wolf's Den show, ladies and gentlemen. We really appreciate every last one of you being here. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we appreciate you having us right there with you. Guys, the den may be closing, but don't you worry. The weekend fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back Thursday through Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10, 9 Central, for the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show starring our buddy, AJ the Ripon Rabbit. That's right, he'll be talking this week about a large multitude of lots of fun. Thursday night, we're going to be talking about the Pharaoh's Curse. Could this be Tutankhamun? Oh, I do hope so. Then Friday night, he'll be talking about deep fakes. Lord knows there's enough of that on the internet, right? The best we can do is try to learn tricks and tips to point these deep fakes out and know how to protect ourselves. Then Saturday and Sunday, guys, these are the most fun you can have on radio. Saturday night, he's joined by co-host Moneybag73 for the Mandela Monthly. This month, they're going to be talking about historical changes. This is a really, really great topic. I don't think they've ever really touched on this before, so this should be really fun. And I love when those two get together, because to watch AJ's mind get blown repeatedly, there's just a little thrill I get out of that, I gotta say. And then Sunday night, speaking of thrills, we've got the most thrilling game show on radio. That's right, it is the Fantastic Fun Show. Will you be the next Fantastic Fun King or Fun King Queen? There's only been one king so far, and that's been me, guys. We can't let that stand. We got to get some guys over here to get a new Fun King. These queens right now are whooping us like the Fun King Queen this month, Miss JoJo's. She really rocked it last month on the show and earned her way up to the throne. Can she hold on to it, or will it be taken away? Only you guys can decide that, coming up this Sunday. The Fantastic Fun Show. Ladies and gentlemen, even though the den may be closing, there is also a place you can hang out with me now, like right now, like as soon as this show is over. You can go over to the riponrabbithole.com. That is the RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. Over there you're going to find the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. You click on that, scroll down half the page, you're going to find the VIP entrance. You do have to allow your microphone and camera, but you can turn those off and stay and chat all you would like. It is lots of fun back there, and the conversation does not end. It keeps on going, guys. We are going to go over there right now, and I really look forward to seeing you guys over there. Also, while you're there, guys, scroll down to the bottom of every one of those pages, and you're going to find a big red button. You can go ahead and send us a 30-second shout-out like Miss Cynthia Sue Larson at the beginning of the show, and you also heard Propagate This Light. So, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and get your shout-out sent to us, and we'll get it sent to the airwaves. I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and this has been another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. On behalf of AJ the Ripon Rabbit and everyone at Ripon Common Sense Radio, we thank you for being here, and remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. Bye, everybody. How? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit, here again. Did you enjoy tonight's show, Giants? If you did, make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell with notifications. You'll get our notifications every time we go live here in the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Jerry will return next Wednesday night starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as he kicks off the weekends right. Speaking of which, here's a look at our schedule. Thursday, July 30th, tomorrow night, I'll return with Pharaoh's Curse. We dive down the rabbit hole into the Tut Curse. Is it evil spirits or just coincidental bad luck? Tune in tomorrow night, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and find out. Then Friday, July 31st, you'll want to join us for Deep Fakes. In an age of fake news and media, what is a deep fake and what isn't? We're going to dive through that rabbit hole together, but more important, we're going to look at ways to spot these deep fakes before they fool us. Then Saturday, August 1st, 2020, co-host Moneybags73 will be here. Our look at the Mandela Monthly for August. That's Saturday, August 1st, 2020. We're going to look at Mandela Effect historical events. I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm going to be prepared to have my mind blown. Then we'll end out the weekend together Sunday, August 2nd, for our monthly installment of the Fantastic Fun Show. If you have no idea, this is an interactive game night where we play an interactive game once a month, and currently JoJo's is seated on the throne as the Fantastic Fun King Queen. Now, will she stay seated, or perhaps will somebody knock her off the throne, take the crown, and claim the Fun King or Queen victory? It's a lot of fun family game night happening this Sunday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on the very best of common sense radio, the RiponRabbitHole.com. If you haven't done so, hop on over to RiponRabbitHole.com and jump on our mail list. We'll send you out our weekend schedule direct to your inbox every Wednesday morning. You'll get an outlook direct to your inbox of exactly the topics we're going to cover for that weekend. And as you know, the weekends around here start on Wednesdays and flow on through the rabbit hole to Sundays. So it's great having these weekends and spending time with you. So, wherever you are, good morning, good evening, or good day, whatever the case may be, from the Ripon Rabbit Hole, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. not a sinner? Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Don't you wish that your weekend was longer than just 2 days? Well, if so, then you're in luck, because here on Ripon Common Sense Radio, our weekend begins on Wednesday. Yes, you heard that right. Our weekend kicks off every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with Dark Wolf's Den, starring yours truly, Jerry the Dark Wolf. But that's where the fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back every Thursday through Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show, starring AJ the Ripon Rabbit. He dives into the archives of vocal legend Art Bell and brings those stories up to date. So make sure that you spend your extended weekends with the animals of radio, Jerry the Dark Wolf and AJ the Ripon Rabbit, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, every Wednesday through Sunday, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Let's do it. Hi there, I'm AJ, host of the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. Our weekend kicks off Wednesdays with
Dark Wolf's Den.
Then we push through the weekend Thursday night, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and return again every Friday night at the same time. The weekend heads on into Saturday, and we end the weekend together Sunday nights. You'll want to join us the first weekend of every month as we dive down the rabbit hole of Mandela Effect with co-host Moneybag73 and our Mandela Monthly. So journey along with us as we dive through the rabbit holes together in the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole live shows. You can see our weekly schedule at the link listed in the description below. Thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live.